Welcome back to the Inside Nebraska Recruiting Blitz podcast. I'm joined once again by Inside Nebraska's own Steve Marik. Steve, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm a little hot. We're recording this on Sunday afternoon. It's really hot. I was just outside with my daughter, throwing around some like water balloon type things. Was not pleasant, but she enjoyed it. So I guess that's what it's all about.
It's been a warm weekend. We were out at the
Yeah.
farmers market yesterday. It was just one of those we had to like stop and find shade. It's too hot. It's gonna be a long summer. It's we're still in June and it's like, oh man, I can't wait till September.
What kind of farmers market person are you? Are you like the guy that like gets a lot of stuff or just like picks out one cool thing he finds?
So we picked up a couple of things. Like we basically did brunch there, because they
Yeah,
have the
of
brunch
course.
option. So we did brunch. Got the lemonade because the lemonade is always good. And then
Hmm.
I'm a big the honey roasted pecans, big fan of those. So I get
Yeah.
those pretty much every single time. You get two for like $8. Split them. It works out. That's my personal preference. That's my type of farmers market haul. How about you?
Yeah, so now that I have a daughter, it's a good thing to take her over there and let her run around and experience life and stuff like that. So it's been cool. I'm definitely somebody who like if I see a pastry, I'm definitely buying that and eating it
Yeah.
right there on the
Yeah.
spot. So it's like I don't know, I love it. There's a whole bunch of cool stuff over there. So
Yeah. Oh, I'm very much not I'm not going there for produce. I'm going there for like little snacks and little,
oh yeah,
or like, hey, I can find a meal here. Let me find a meal here.
yeah.
Um, that's my personal preference. But speaking of the farmers market, that's been an event that Nebraska's kind of utilized as a recruiting tool in a way,
I was
especially
gonna bring them up.
in Lincoln too. That's been something. The Lincoln one is a lot of fun and
Hmm.
players have kind of enjoyed seeing that element. I think the community element in Nebraska is something that's resonated with a lot of recruits. Same thing coming out of this past weekend. Nebraska had 11 visitors on official visitors on campus this week. Just a handful of uncommitted visitors.
Hmm.
Most of the rest were commits, and those guys spent a lot of time. Caden Vermas, Pierce Newberry, Tanner Turch, Jackson Carpenter, Jamarian Parker. Those guys spent a lot of time peer recruiting others to join them, while also enjoying, the large amount of food they were fed this past weekend. I heard steaks. This we're on the menu this weekend. A whole lot of snacks. Nebraska did a good job of reaching out to these guys ahead of time and being like, hey, what kind of snacks do you like? What kind of candy do you like? And
That's awesome.
they send
Details,
whatever they
right?
want.
All about
Yeah,
the
details,
details.
exactly. And so these guys send what they want, and those are waiting for them when they get on campus and get to their hotel room. So Nebraska leaving all getting all those details taken care of. But overall, like we said, weekend went well. We kind of have some notes over on Inside Nebraska on that. We'll touch on some specific official visitors later in this video. But to start this off, um, news that by the time this comes out, will be out is Mekhi Nelson is not only committing to Nebraska but reclassifying to the 2024 cycle and will be on camp is already on campus. Will pretty much be on the team this fall. So a new running back slash athlete take for Nebraska. He's primarily played running back in his career thus far. But Nebraska had him in camp earlier this month. They worked him out at wide receiver and DB and even a couple other positions, just trying to figure out kind of what if there's some versatility there, and there's enough that the staff has not only brought him on for an official visit, but has now accepted his commitment and has him on campus ready to roll. Just kind of adds another versatile body to the room. I think it's tough to kind of talk about what he would potentially bring at any other position, considering he has tape at no other position. But
Yeah.
solely as a running back, I don't think it's hard to see the vision here. Steve, kind of watching his film, kind of what do you see from a guy?
Well, I think where I first want to start is I always remember Rule talking about his running back room, his perfect running back room. Like, what does he want in it? He wants big guys, big, strong, powerful downhill backs, and he also wants the quicker, smaller, shiftier guys. And I think that's what we're seeing with the Gabe Irvins right there, the Ramir Johnsons, the Emmett Johnsons. There's just a nice healthy mix of size and then shiftiness and speed. And I think Nelson is one of those kind of smaller, shiftier backs who can make something happen with the ball in his hands in space. And I don't think he's necessarily the one that's going to run you over, the downhill type, but at least from my point of view, I think he's a a smaller, shiftier back that fits what Rule wants in his room. So, and like we said, this is the EJ Barthel connection out on the East Coast. And I just think that he fits what Matt Rule wants in his running back room. But again, we'll see. They were trying him out like we saw at that camp, Tim, wide receiver, DB drills. He was doing those too. We'll see. Nebraska's running back recruiting has been interesting to say the least lately. So, and this is just another interesting take in my opinion. But, if there's anything that we've learned from Matt Rule and his staff, it's that they will take somebody that they see something in, and it might not be the position that they end up playing. They're just going to be they're going to come in here, do their work, and Matt Rule and his staff are going to find the position that they think fits him best. And so, is Nelson going to end up stay at a running back? I don't know. That's one of the things that we've learned with this staff is to wait and see.
Yep, wait and see with him. And with him, I'm very interested in kind of what the first couple of weeks of fall camp looks like. Obviously, that'll be one that'll be on a couple of people's minds when we get into fall camp. Kind of where does he fit in? Not just in the running back rotation, but obviously what other positions is he potentially working in at? There is some uncertainty with that defensive back room right now. And we saw that even further on display with the fact that they brought in USC transfer defensive back Ceyair Wright in for a visit this weekend. That visit, by all accounts, has gone well. I've gathered some background intel on Ceyair, just kind of what went wrong at USC, or not even what went wrong, but more so why he left midseason. He started 11 games back in 2022, but then he was expected to compete for playing time in 2023, then left the team mid-year. Kind of did some digging on what exactly happened there. Again, well, from what I've been able to gather, there aren't real red flags here. I think the main issue from what I heard was he's not only he's an actor, he's an accomplished actor. We can't even say aspiring actor. He's an accomplished actor with he was in the new Space Jam with LeBron James. He played LeBron James's son. That's his most notable role, but he's been in a couple other things. Being in Los Angeles, coming from Los Angeles, I think he was trying to balance out his football career, his acting career, and it got to be a lot. Now, from everything I've heard, it sounds like he's kind of focused in on football, trying to make the most of this right now while he can. Acting will be there down the line if he wants it to, but obviously, those acting distractions aren't necessarily there in Lincoln, Nebraska, like they are in Los Angeles, California. So if he does eventually commit to Nebraska, this is the only visit that we know of that he's taken. I'm not sure how many other schools are even on his radar or he's on their radar at this point. I think he's just trying to find a home at this point, try and get settled before the season. So this one could potentially move quickly for Nebraska. Steve, kind of what have you been able to watch on Ceyair? Have you been able to gather anything? Kind of what do you just generally make of the fact that Nebraska's pursuing a defensive back like this so late in the transfer portal cycle?
So I wasn't able to watch any of his game film yet, but I'll just be honest. When I first dug into him and find out who he was and his situation at USC, the red flag did pop up in my head. I was like, oh, well, he wants to be an actor. Is he all in on football? This doesn't seem like a Matt Rule recruit to bring in somebody who's not all in on something. Is he going to be OOU? All of that was running through my head. So I'm still kind of cautious with it right now. But the fact that they are bringing him in for a visit and the visit went well, it tells me that, and also the fact that, in Matt Rule's latest press conference last week, they're moving Jaden Doss to cornerback. He was a 4-star receiver out of Raymore Peculiar High School. So that just tells me that opposite Tommy Hill, that cornerback spot is up for grabs right now. And it's not a great feeling, for a defense that's coming back. It's bringing back a veteran unit at all three levels, D-line, linebacker, in the defensive backfield. There's a lot to like, but the big question is that starting corner spot opposite of Tommy Hill. And, there's just a lot of question marks. Who's it going to be? Is it going to be Jeremiah Charles? Jeremiah Charles is a redshirt freshman who has barely played football in his life. It's going to be his third year of playing football. Dwight Boodle, is he going to be an option? He was more of a safety when I watched him in his first 3 games last year as a true freshman before his injury. I don't know. I don't know what that cornerback spot opposite Tommy Hill looks like. So I can totally understand why Nebraska wants to continue to push to see if they can get some sort of experienced depth there. And Wright is absolutely experienced. I mean, everybody's going to look at USC and their defense, and it hasn't been that great. Obviously, it's been well documented that Lincoln Riley's problem is his defense. And the red flag of leaving the team in October, which he did, that doesn't sit well with me. So it just, I'm a little cautious of this right now. I don't know if he's going to be the answer to Nebraska's problems, but he's experienced. He brings depth. Bring him in. Competition is king. The best one will rise to the top, and I think that's the goal right now with potentially bringing in somebody like Ceyair Wright.
Yeah, the way Nebraska kind of manages their roster, they're able, and the way the culture on the culture that's been established is right now, they're able to make some of these swings. They took like taking a Reed Gilbert last year was extremely risky.
Yeah.
People knew
Oh, yeah.
that coming in. And this doesn't have the similar type of risk. There is a risk of, hey, he comes in and maybe doesn't contribute, but there's no real off the field risk here in terms of there's going to be any red flags. He's going to portray the team in a bad light. He's going to do anything like that. That's not the red flag here. There's no
Mm-hmm.
issues in that sense here. More
Mm-hmm.
than anything, it's just this isn't people want established talent or established name, and this isn't exactly the type of established talent maybe they had hoped for. But this
Mm-hmm.
is kind of what Nebraska's doing in terms of trying to get the right guys in the building and trying to get competition in the building, and again, working with what's out there. You can only work with what's out there. That they went through the spring hoping that Bly Hale would be
Oh,
healthy, and that
so
just
tough. Yeah.
Bly Hill having that injury in the spring game doesn't help. Ethan
Mm-hmm.
Nation, getting removed from the roster,
Mm-hmm.
right after the spring doesn't help. Those were things they could not anticipate when the transfer portal period opened. And a lot of those top corners, they were off the board pretty quick. That was a highly coveted
Yeah.
position in the transfer portal. So the ones that are left around, this is the staff doing their due diligence, evaluating what's left out there, what they can potentially work with. And this is one where, this could ultimately work out for Nebraska, but it might not. And at the end of the day, it's I don't think on either side it's going to be much harm, much foul. You know what I mean? Like I don't think
Mm-hmm.
this is a high or a what am I trying to say here? This is a low risk, high reward potential situation. Is probably the best
Mm-hmm.
way to put it. Because again, if this doesn't work out for both sides, if this doesn't work out if it doesn't work out for Nebraska, obviously, then we'll have some serious questions about that cornerback 2 spot. But if it doesn't work out for Wright, he's got acting. He has an established career there. He has
Yeah.
already established a pretty good established plan B.
Mm-hmm.
If this football thing doesn't work out for him. So I don't hate this at all. And in fact, I'm pretty encouraged by the fact that they're willing to take these type of swings, willing to take these type of chances, even this late. I think it's an encouraging thing that, like, I saw people on Twitter being like, hey, should we, or people on, even on a message board as well, just being like, hey, should we read anything into the fact that they're trying to bring in this? What does this mean for the room? Yeah, yes, of course, there's some questions about the deep defensive back room, but what I would prefer a staff, that does do their due diligence to add talent to the roster,
Mm-hmm.
that is working to constantly add good players to their football team. That's what you want at the end of the day, isn't it? Regardless of position, you want that. And they show that again, just with some of the preferred walk-ons they've
Yep.
taken over this last week. Steve, you've had a couple of stories on these guys this week. Kind
Mm-hmm.
of we'll start with Jalyn
Yeah.
Gramstad, the quarterback they took. Talk about his story a little bit and what Nebraska's kind of getting in him.
So Jalyn Gramstad he was last year's NAI player of the year. So he was a big deal at that level of football. He is a small town Iowa kid. He went to Northwestern College, which is in Orange City, Iowa. He was recruited to play quarterback, but he was a defensive back his first 2 seasons on the field. So he's just a straight up football player, and I think Matt Rule is really going to like that. He's also just a winner. He's won at every single level. He played at West Lyon High School in Iowa, won a state championship there. So he went to Northwestern College After that, he spent 2 seasons as a defensive back. Once their other All-American quarterback left the program, he was then switched to quarterback where he was always meant to be. And then he won a national championship. He guided Northwestern College to a national championship. And then this past season, he won the NAIA Player of the Year award, like I mentioned before, and then also took that team to a runner-up finish. So just a really impressive guy, a strong resume. He passed for over 6,000 yards and 60 touchdowns with only 13 interceptions in his 2 seasons as a quarterback. Dual threat guy. 2 seasons ago, he rushed for over 1,000 yards. He's not big. He's 6 foot, around 190 pounds. So that always makes you wonder. But for what Nebraska needs in the quarterback room right now, he is experienced depth. He is just, I think he's going to be very, very helpful at Nebraska. I think this is a great addition. When you look at Nebraska's quarterback room, there's just not a ton of experience. Yes, Heinrich Haarberg comes back. He was 5-3 as a starter last year. We'll see what his role is on the team come fall. And so you got him. That's good. But Dylan Raiola, Danny Kalen, Luke Longval, Bodie Sukup is another walk-on in there. There's none of those guys that played a college snap in their entire lives. And obviously Dylan Raiola is a favorite to win the job, and he's mighty, mighty talented. But if you just add in somebody like Jalyn Gramstad, who has been playing college football for the past 4 years, there's not a lot that he hasn't seen before, I don't think. And I don't care about the level of play. NAIA is still college football too. So he's been there, he's done that. He knows what he's doing. I talked to him on the phone. He sounds like a coach, Tim. He sounds like a coach. And I just think that having him inside of the quarterback room, he's really going to help everybody in there. Is he going to push for a starting spot? I don't think so. But can he push for a backup? Can he be a really solid game managing type backup? Yeah. Husker fans know all too well about an injury history with the quarterback situation here. If something were to happen with the starting quarterback, let's just say Dylan Raiola ends up winning the starting job and he goes down, you have an experienced backup option and in Jalyn Gramstad. And I absolutely think that that's exactly what the quarterback room needed. So he's a really interesting guy. I urge everybody to go to Inside Nebraska and read my story that I wrote on him, because it was really kind of interesting how Nebraska found him. It was just kind of on a whim. He was with his family up in Minnesota, sitting around a campfire right by a lake with his grandpa, and his grandpa's talking about everything he's done in his life. And he said that taking risks in life is something that really did well for him. Not staying complacent. And Jalyn kind of took that to heart. And so he wound up driving to Lincoln and competing at that post-grad camp. And he caught the eye of the coaches and sent them some of the game film. And they obviously liked what they saw and thought he could be a really strong addition to the quarterback room. And I absolutely agree with them. So that was the first one. And then let's talk about the two other additions. Hayes Miller was at that same post-grad camp. So Hayes Miller is a receiver from Coffeyville Community College. He played in 3 games last year. He caught 3 passes. So there's not a lot on his resume right now. However, I was at that post-grad camp and I noticed Hayes Miller. He popped to me. I did not, and it's kind of funny because I did not notice Jalyn Gramstad at all. I didn't know who he was until he kind of blew up afterwards. But Hayes Miller, he was quick. The footwork was just on display. His route running was really crisp. I thought he was catching everything. Matt Rule even took a snap and threw some passes to him. And one of them was really, really behind Hayes. He was in the slot and he was running like an in-cut route. And Rule's pass was way behind him, but it didn't matter. Hayes, like a cat, kind of snatched it behind himself and he kept running. It was really, really impressive. So after the camp, he got offered a PWO, preferred walk-on. I called him up, talked to him about it. And he said that, what he thought caught the eye of Garrett McGuire, Nebraska's wide receivers coach, was his footwork, his route running skills. And yeah, I totally agreed that. I totally knew what he was talking about. So that's a really interesting one too. Not a lot, like I said, not a lot on the resume there. But I think he can come in and Garrett McGuire is going to coach him up. An interesting thing with Hayes Miller, when I was talking to him, he didn't really have a dedicated wide receivers coach at Coffeyville last season until like late in the year. So it was kind of a weird situation. He told me that he wasn't really able to develop there at the speed that he would have liked, but he's sure going to develop now under somebody like Garrett McGuire. So that's a really interesting one. And then for the third one, the addition, I think it was a couple of days ago out of the transfer portal, John Hohl. He's a Lincoln Southwest kicker who spent last year at Iowa Western Community College. So he's an in-state product. He redshirted his season at Iowa Western last year. He didn't kick at all, so I don't think he's had a kick attempt in college yet. But what I think is happening here is, if you look at Nebraska's kicking room right now, obviously Tristan Alvano is the guy. They brought in Nico Otomanelli. He's a true freshman this fall. Everybody kind of knows Tristan Alvano's true freshman season last year was kind of up and down, mostly down. He went 9-15 on the year. He missed a really kind of key field goal late in the year against Wisconsin. Then he missed another one late in the game with 5 minutes left in the fourth quarter against Iowa. That one really stung. Again, competition is king. I don't think Matt Rhule is sitting around and waiting for anything to happen. He's going to add people that he thinks can push other people in the room. And I think that's what John Hohl is going to do. I don't think John Hohl is going to come into Nebraska and, win a starting spot over Tristan Alvano, but he's going to come in and, if Tristan Alvano continues to struggle like he did in the spring game, he missed 2 kicks, Tim, in the spring game. Now, who knows? There's 2 other guys in the room to try out. It's just different options. And that's what, we saw with Jalyn Gramstad at quarterback and Hayes Miller at wide receiver and now John Hohl at kicker.
He feels that pressure more than anyone. Like, don't.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think
He knows the situation.
He feels that pressure more than anyone. He's worked on his game. But before we get out of here, we just kind of wanted to touch on the visit weekend, of course. Just some quick hitting notes just before we get out of here. We'll start with Chase Loftin, 4-star tight end, in-state tight end, priority target. Everything I've heard from Loftin this weekend has been really encouraging. I think Nebraska, he's still on campus as we're recording this Sunday. As we speak, he's still on campus. He spent Saturday back home in Omaha for a funeral, so he's kind of took an extra day for the visit. So getting some additional, almost pretty much one-on-one time with the coaching staff. Nebraska needed this kind of the fact they've got this last visit. We said last week, A&M and Florida State as contentious as this has gotten, Nebraska getting this final visit says a lot and also helps a lot. Nebraska kind of has a chance here to kind of to close that door on some of these other contenders, and it sounds like they've done a really good job of doing that so far. And so again, decision coming in the foreseeable future. We'll find out kind of what that final decision ends up being, the same as y'all, but coming out of the weekend, Nebraska's kind of laid it all out on the table for him. And, he understands he's a priority. He understands he has a chance to come in and compete early. Now it's just, it's up to him to kind of decide, where he wants to spend, what he wants to do. He has an opportunity to stay in state, play for the in-state team, or he has an opportunity, like I think A&M is probably the biggest contender here. Go somewhere new, experience something new, and kind of see what that's like for himself. And Nebraska's on the other side of that for another prospect, Will Hawthorne, 3-star linebacker out of Gilbert, Iowa. Just a couple minutes away from Iowa State. It's coming down to Iowa State and Nebraska for Hawthorne. Nebraska did a really good job with him this weekend. He's got a mutual friendship with Caden Vermas. Caden's older brother is best friends with Will's second cousin. So they put that together going into the visit weekend, and then they spent pretty much the visit weekend. Him, Pierce Newberry, Tanner Church, Jackson Carpenter all spent the weekend together. So Nebraska having him spend a lot of time with the commits was big. Just helping him get comfortable, helping him have an established group of, what he said are now true friends on campus. But Will is on the other side of this. Like Loftin has an opportunity to potentially go do something new or stay home. For Hawthorne, it's like, do I stay in pretty much in my city, 15 minutes away and play?
Yeah, it's a 60-minute drive from his high school to Ames.
You're right. And so it's like, do I stay home? Do I put on for this team, or do I go experience something new in the Big Ten? So that's what his decision's coming down to, is he's now headed home. He's going to sit down with his family, kind of discuss these final 2 options for him, where they kind of stand for him. And ultimately, I think it's coming down to these 2. I think it is really close. I don't think he's leaning one way or the other right now. He seems to be weighing this really hard, and this is a tough decision for him, kind of like I said, like putting into the context of staying home or trying something new is very difficult. Listeners, even if you didn't go through the recruiting process, you didn't do this, I'm sure many people can relate to that of like, do I stay home and do something that's comfortable? Do I make myself uncomfortable? You can't go wrong either way. People on both sides will tell you you can't really go wrong either way. And so just curious to see how that one ends up. But Nebraska did a really good job in terms of how fast this recruitment has moved as well. They offered just 2 weeks ago, established themselves as that second school for him. He was considering OVs to Kansas State, Iowa State, and Nebraska. He sat down with his family. He's like, if I had to pick between two, it's Iowa State and Nebraska. So they canceled that Kansas State official visit so they can make his decision a little easier. But the fact that Nebraska was able to do that, considering Kansas State offered weeks before Nebraska did, says a lot about Nebraska's efforts already just in that recruitment.
I watched his highlights. He reminds me of a bull that like accidentally got loose out of the pen and starts like rampaging just citizens.
Yeah, he told me he was like the word he heard from the staff was they like that he's an old school style linebacker with modern day athleticism, and that's the best way to put it. He's got good track times, he's got good athleticism, verified athleticism, but he plays the game, the way you want like a physical bruising linebacker to play the game.
Oh yeah. And yeah, so, he just reminded me of a bull.
So
I was like, oh boy, that would be a really good addition to the linebacker room.
No doubt. One other or two others I just wanted to touch on real quick. Jeremiah Jones came in, was a late addition somewhat late addition to the visitor list out of Murray, Kentucky. He's an interesting athlete. We have him listed at 6'6", 205. He's probably closer to 6'4", 6'5". Plays a bunch of different positions for his high school. Plays linebacker, plays safety, plays some DB, plays quarterback, plays running back, does some receiver, like just does it all.
Could be your X receiver, could be your rover on defense.
Could do it all.
The sky's the limit for this kid. Need to know more about him.
Yeah, and it's a wonder. You go look at his offer list, you go look at the schools that are interested. It's a wonder he's got pretty much 2 P4 offers, Louisville and Nebraska. His recruitment is pretty much coming down to these 2 schools. When I first got on the beat, Jeremiah was one I did some digging on just initially, just to kind of figure out what was happening. And because he was one of the weird ones on Nebraska's offer list, one that only has 2 P4 offers, doesn't have a whole lot on him. Did some digging, asked around. Everyone I talked to said, hey, in-state Louisville's the school to beat. I just have, everyone I talked to said they have a hard time seeing Louisville losing out on this in-state talent. From what I've heard coming out of this weekend, Nebraska did a good enough job where they're kind of coming out of the weekend as the #1 school in his recruitment. And a decision is not necessarily imminent, but it's coming in the coming days. He's hoping to have that in early July, make that commitment. What I'd be wary of here is Louisville is competitive with NIL, depending on how they view Jones in terms of on their board, how much of a priority he is for them. I think there's a chance Louisville could put up some type of offer here that Nebraska just either isn't willing to match or is unable to match just because of the way Louisville's playing the NIL game right now. That's something to keep an eye on. But as things stand right now, coming out of the weekend, I feel good about Nebraska's chances there. Another DB I'm cautiously optimistic on Nebraska's chances is Bryson Webber out of Fort Bend Ridgepoint. A tall, long DB, legit 6'3".
So long.
Legit 6'3", yep. And I went and saw him, in the spring at the Under Armour Houston camp. Really impressive, young player considering his limited experience at defensive back. He hasn't played a whole lot of defensive back. Last year was his real first year committing to that position. But now he's got, the likes of Utah, and every time Utah offers a DB, you have to pay attention. They know what they're talking about with that position.
You listen if Utah is on you.
Oh, yeah. And TCU, Baylor, so he's got some big time schools in this recruitment alongside Nebraska. It's coming down to TCU, Nebraska, and I think Utah, Texas Tech, a couple others in there as well. I'm a little wary of TCU here. He's already made official visits there. He's already made official visits to a couple other places. Nebraska was the last one. He's going home to go sit down, kind of decide kind of what's next for him. But Nebraska did a really good job. He said the visit went better than expected. They were his first offer. That means a lot to him. He mentioned Evan Cooper kind of got onto him for the fact that he had yet to visit Nebraska. This was his first visit to Nebraska, considering Nebraska was the first. But it did mean a lot that not only was Nebraska the first to offer, Nebraska stayed on him consistently, even though he didn't necessarily explode into like a 4-star recruit or anything. He's been a top defensive back target for them for months, and that hasn't really changed. So we'll see. This is one I'm curious to kind of see what he kind of thinks, a couple of days from now. That's the overall sentiment coming out of this final weekend of official visits. All of this is so busy. A lot of these players, give them some grace. They've been on a lot of visits, 3, 4, 5, some of them 6, over this last month, just packing it all in. So now
Mhm.
it's time to just decompress, sit down, kind of compare, contrast all these different schools and figure out what's next. Nebraska may not have had, they've picked up some commits this month, but may not have had the month people thought. I think you're going to see some big announcements though in these next couple of weeks, and I would remain encouraged by the fact that the season is yet to come, and a positive season will lead to better recruiting results as well down the line. And Steve, before we get out of here, just kind of wanted to touch on a couple injury updates and a couple interesting things Matt Rule said in a press conference with the media last week. Starting with some of those injury updates, Steve, I know we heard a couple of notable updates I think the fans want to know about. So kind of kick us off there.
Yeah, so the key contributors that got hurt last year, all of them season-ending injuries. Safety Deshaun Singleton, running back Gabe Ervin Jr., and then tackle guard, whatever you want to call him, Turner Corcoran. Matt Rule said they are fully integrated into the summer workouts, and they're going to be ready to roll for fall camp, which begins after Big Ten Media Days, July 24th. I think Nebraska is going in Indy. So big news, especially with Turner Corcoran, because last time Matt Rule talked about Turner Corcoran last year, I think it was. He said that he thought the foot injury that Turner had to have surgery on would have bled into maybe the beginning parts of the 2024 season. So that was big news that Matt Rule said Turner Corcoran is all ready to go for fall camp. So that's interesting. That I think a lot of people were kind of writing Turner Corcoran off for the offensive line. Is he a tackle? Is he going to maybe compete at a guard spot? Who knows? Can do both. So that's interesting. Deshaun Singleton, obviously he got hurt in that 5th game. He hurt his knee really early in the Michigan game. Getting him back is going to be big. Just another experienced guy back there, big hitter, downhill safety, which I always love. A lot of people liked what Deshaun kind of showed, and then Gabe Ervin Jr. We'll see what he can do. Dislocated hip was his injury last year in that 3rd game against Northern Illinois. We'll just see. We'll see
That's
what
a
Gabe
tough
Ervin
one.
can
That's a
do.
tough injury to come back
It
from. It's
is.
tough, and he's dealt with a couple of these at this point. Like it's tough.
Yeah. Tough
He's
injury
one we'll have to
situation.
for sure. One we'll have to wait and see again. Just a tough break. Like you can't
Hmm.
you never want. Injuries are the worst thing in the sport. Like the fact that careers can change so fast and trajectories and all of that. And so
Hmm.
we'll find out what Gabe is specifically, and all these guys. Obviously these are significant injuries they're coming back from.
And maybe it's a thing with Irvin where he's, maybe not fully ready to go at the start of the season, but like once November hits and then you want then maybe
And then you want and
Gabriel.
then you want a really
Yeah,
big physical back that can lower their shoulder into guys,
absolutely.
can enforce some pain.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's one to definitely keep an eye. I think what's interesting with Singleton, kind of because he was kind of just off everyone's radar during the spring with the injury, kind of
Yep.
what does this change? We've talked about that second cornerback spot. Does this
Hmm.
potentially open up an opportunity for Malcolm to kind of slide back into
Malcolm
corner?
Hartzog.
And Steve, you and I have kind of talked about this outside of the pod, but
Hmm.
going back and watching some of Malcolm's stuff, I know the fan base is kind of giving him a hard time on some of the cornerback stuff he's had, but the kid can play. The kid
Yeah.
can really play, corner or safety. There's obviously some limitations because of his length.
Hmm.
There's obviously going to be some limitations there, but you put him in at boundary or field, either or, but you've got Tommy on one side and you've got a guy like Malcolm who's played some of that experience. I wouldn't necessarily be surprised if the solution to that second cornerback spot just ends up being what it's always been, which is just
Yeah.
getting Malcolm back in there. He's played 2 years pretty much at the position. He's done a good job.
Hmm.
He understands, kind of the defensive back rotation. He communicates well with the rest of the guys. Has some familiarity in that top group. So, uh,
Hmm.
kind of curious to see how he fits in there. And then another thing Matt Rule kind of touched on was just these camps that we've been at this summer, we've seen this summer. Just some of the
Hmm.
numbers, Steve. I know you have that on hand. Some of the numbers coming out of it were pretty astounding.
Yeah, so he said that there were campers from 37 different states that came to Nebraska and showed their stuff in front of the coaches. I thought that was really cool. And was it over 4,000?
I think it was
Uh,
over 4,000.
over 4,000 total for the entire month. What I really like about Matt Rule's presser when he was talking about the camps was it wasn't all about finding somebody that they can recruit and add to the future rosters. It's about growing Nebraska football's brand, and not really Nebraska football, just Nebraska's brand in general. Just having all these kids have a good time at a camp, learn something that they can take into their high school seasons for the next year. That's going to stay inside them. So maybe if they it maybe athletics is not part of their future. Maybe they're just looking for a cool school to go to. Nebraska. Maybe some of them are like, oh, I enjoyed my time at Nebraska. It was a cool city. Maybe I'm gonna go to school there. It's all about branding with Matt Rule and showing um, the country how cool of a place Nebraska is and can be, and all the resources that it has around here. I just thought that was a really cool thing for Matt Rule to say out loud was, with his camps, obviously he's trying to find players that are potentially really good enough to help his team. But on top of that, more than that, it's helping, show everybody that Nebraska's brand is a good one. And, the Huskers are a cool spot.
For sure. Talking to, I mean, I've been around. I've seen some of these camps at this point. I was at A&M, saw some of those camps. I've seen the way SMU runs. SMU runs a mega camp. I've seen the way Houston runs their camps. I know the way Michigan runs their camps. I know how the way some of these other programs run camps. And now seeing the way Nebraska does theirs, more than just the fact that these guys are coming to Nebraska. These guys are coming to Nebraska and they're getting legitimate like FaceTime with these coaches. They're
Yeah.
getting genuine tips.
Mm-hmm.
They're working on technique. They're not just going through straight one-on-ones again and again and again. And then coaches just taking notes, and they're going through reps. They're going through different drills. They're working on like improving parts of the game. We saw Donovan Raiola with the O-line group, like one by one, walking through and working on technique, working on
Mm-hmm.
posture, working on drive, working on foot drive, working on all of that. Like, we saw EJ Bartell working with the running backs. We saw Evan Cooper work like a close eye on DBs, like talking to them about keeping your hips low, getting in and out of backpedal, like adding stuff to your game. There's guys I talked to that came into the camp and got offered, and now just the way Nebraska's kind of worked are a bit lower on the board, and they don't even know if they're going to end up at Nebraska, but they've talked about like, hey, Cooper gave me this tip on getting out of my backpedal that I'm going to use this next season. Something that like
Mm-hmm.
I just hadn't thought about or really hadn't been taught this way. So more than anything, again, like we talk about spreading Nebraska's brand, these guys are coming here, even if they're young, and more so than the 25s and 26s, the 27s and the 28s down the line that are at these camps
Mm-hmm.
and are coming into Nebraska and experiencing this development, experiencing the culture, again, seeing this university beyond these players too. Remember, these players are coming with their families, they're coming with
Yes.
siblings,
Mom and dad are
and this
accompanying them.
exactly, and these are these may be people who aren't really a fan of any program, and then
Mm-hmm.
they come to Nebraska, they have a good time. They have some FaceTime with these coaches. All of us remember being 13, 14, 15 and what it kind of meant to go to just a football game. And so for some of
Mm-hmm.
these kids that are young, that haven't had the recruiting process really take off for them, it's just a cool experience for them to get coached by a D1 coaching staff, a Power Four coaching staff, and a staff that some of these guys have competed and coached in the league. Like this is a rare opportunity for them, and the type of stuff that makes lifelong fans. Whether or not they come to the university, whether they contribute a meaningful snap to the university,
Mm-hmm.
you're creating fans, you're creating a brand, and again, like 37 states is significant. You're getting
Yes.
national again. You're getting to a point where Nebraska's a known brand nationally again. I think that's important, and it shows again just how intentional the staff is about so many different things just beyond the recruiting side of things. All of it eventually does factor into, at the end of the day, why do you brand as well as you do? It's so you're recognizable to recruits. But
Mm-hmm.
that branding is important, and there's steps that need to be taken in order to get back to that point where you're a nationally recognized and respected brand. And Nebraska and Coach Rule specifically are doing the right things there. And then
And
another
Rule
point,
also wanted,
go
sorry to
ahead.
cut you off, but Rule also wanted to add he recognizes the 7-on-7 for women's sports is kind of growing.
Mhm.
That arena is kind of growing. So in the future, Matt Rule said he's trying to work at maybe getting like a women's girls 7-on-7 camp going, or flag football, something like that, just to get the girls involved too, because he wants Nebraska to be known as the football state in the country. And what better way to do that of than doing stuff for guys and girls. So
Oh yeah, for sure. And again, you think about the state,
yeah,
how many girls follow football? You know what I mean? How many girls are
for sure.
watching the games or at the games anyway? You know what I mean? And so they like the sport, they invest in the sport. They've just never had the chance, and
Hmm.
so rules like the rules giving them that opportunity. Yeah, again, all of this is it's about spreading the brand. It's about doing things the right way as well. All of this is at the
Hmm.
end of the day, they are doing things here the right way, trying to you just again like immerse themselves into this community and again the way
Hmm.
they talk, there's talk about what the staff could do potentially down the line, or how long are they going to be here at Nebraska. The way they're acting, the way they're operating is like they're going to be here for the foreseeable future, pretty much until if when Nebraska doesn't want them anymore. It's pretty much the way they're
Yeah.
operating is like we're going to be here as long as you'll have us. So
Hmm.
good to see that from the staff. Good to see real, true investment. I think another interesting note from that presser is talking about the way he runs camps. He's like, kind of talked about how they're not finding in the business of finding hidden gems. They're in the business of evaluating, and how like, guys
Hmm.
go to Ohio State and get offered, they're not considered hidden gems. They're just considered good evals, and how they want Nebraska to be the same way. And I get that. I understand that. And you're seeing that proof kind of in the pudding. Some of the guys they offered last year, the younger guys they offered, and seeing those guys turn up into big established, like, big time recruits. Brock Boyd was one, that they didn't offer. He didn't come to Nebraska, but they offered him while they were down in Lincoln or down in Texas, at a camp down there. Now he's a four-star prospect, has 20 plus or 15, 20 plus schools after him. Nebraska's very much in that because they were one of the first schools, and he's got a good relationship with Garrett McGuire. But that
Hmm.
was one last year, a couple more from last year, they had. But even this year alone, 2026 offensive lineman out of South Dakota, Hudson Parliament, he's seen some big time schools kind of show interest since he's picked up that Nebraska offer, like that 26 contact periods come and gone. And he mentioned, like the schools like Alabama, schools like, what I mean? Like some of these big time schools are now in that mix for him, kind of reaching out. Iowa State, Michigan State, like all these bigger time schools are now reaching out to him, kind of interested in him. Nebraska didn't necessarily find a hidden gem there. That the player was the same player before and after the camp.
Hmm.
He's just talented, and Nebraska happened to be one of the first schools to offer him. That's all it is there. Another one, 2027, Pierre Riggs out of South Dakota as well.
Cooper
Tight
Terwilliger.
end Cooper Terwilliger picked up a
Hmm.
Georgia offer last week.
Yeah.
Again, that's another one. Nebraska just happens to be one of the first schools to offer, but not
Hmm.
necessarily a hidden gem. This is a guy that's going to be a national recruit, but it does stick with these guys at the fact that just like it does at Ohio State, it sticks with these guys that they come to these camps and they get offered one of their first offers from a school like Nebraska or a school like Ohio State. That's one of those first offers, those first five offers, I know for a fact, always stick with these guys. The first couple of schools to give them a chance, it stays with them no matter what. Again, the reason we mentioned this earlier in the pod, but the reason Bryson Webber visited at this point is because Nebraska was the first to offer him.
Hmm.
And now Nebraska has a real chance now to land his commitment. Going into the weekend, I didn't think that was the case. Coming out of the weekend, that's a real case because Nebraska was the first. He's giving Nebraska a chance. He spent the weekend in Nebraska. They exceeded expectations. Now he's home. Now he's considering his decision, and Nebraska's a legitimate, formidable foe to TCU and Utah and Baylor and all those other schools in his still involved in his recruitment. So, but outside of that, for us, I think that just about does it. Steve,
Hmm.
is there anything else? I guess one quick note while we're here before we get out of here. Just we've talked a bit of Will Hawthorne and kind of that linebacker class. And last week we talked about Christian Jones, where he would kind of fit into the linebacker room. Obviously, they have that commit from Pierce Newberry already in the linebacker room. Kind of the big development that's kind of happened over the course of this week is this back and forth tug of war between Alabama and Nebraska for Dawson Merritt. Kind of the
Yeah.
latest intel coming out of late last week and going into the weekend was that kind of Alabama had probably done a really good job of kind of closing that door on Nebraska for potentially good. We'll find out. In this, I think a decision's coming anytime soon,
Will
but
we get some more emojis,
we
cryptic
potentially
emoji
could.
tweets?
We've seen some ominous emojis, and he's doing his due diligence in evaluating these two schools and
Hmm.
making it's a very difficult decision for him. Kind of deciding which side of this will be which will be his school. But right now, just kind of where we're sitting here on Sunday night, Dawson is the latest intel we've heard is this is potentially going Alabama's way, which would be a tough loss for Nebraska. But at the same time, I anticipate Nebraska is going to keep recruiting him through the end of the cycle. They're going to try and push through
Sure.
signing day. And just a general note on recruiting, I've mentioned this on the board. I think I've mentioned this on Twitter at this point. I mentioned this a couple of places, but um, I know people get a little frustrated about where certain developments in recruiting, like they haven't necessarily gotten those 4 or 5 stars like people thought at specific positions. Wide receiver recruiting is not looking the way people might have thought it would after the spring game. And Emmanuel Choice just committed to Oklahoma. That's a tough one for
Hmm.
Nebraska. That was a receiver Nebraska really wanted, that big outside receiver.
Yep.
Linebacker recruiting going the way it kind of has. I still feel confident they'll eventually land Christian Jones. We'll see what happens with Will Hawthorne as well, but
Hmm.
they do already have a linebacker in the class. But I'll say this overall, just in general, the point I'm trying to make here on recruiting is understand that for a lot of these players watching Nebraska's checked a lot of boxes. They have the facilities now. They have arguably and this is not something I'm just saying as a person that covers Nebraska. I'm saying this as someone that has talked to these recruits that have been all over the country. And what these recruits are saying is that Nebraska has the best facilities in the country, arguably the best in the country, if you want to put it there. So Nebraska has the facilities now to compete with any program in the country. Nebraska has built strong relationships with a lot of these players, genuine strong relationships that these guys say are kind of unmatched at other programs. Even though they may be committed elsewhere or leaning elsewhere, they've mentioned that, hey, our best relationship still is Nebraska. Like the last thing Rule says to a lot of these guys on these official visits before they leave is, hey, we want you to find a good home, even if it's not Nebraska. We want you to find a good home. We want to make sure you're
Hmm.
taken care of. So if you ever have any questions about the recruiting process, ever need any advice, even if we're not pushing you to come here, or even if we know you're not coming here, we'll be here to give you that advice. We'll be here as a resource for you. So they're doing a lot of these things and checking a lot of these boxes, but on-field results still have not been there. This first year, this was per year one of the Rule staff. And from what we've seen from the spring, from what we believe this team is capable of, looking at the record, they should start to see on-field improvement this year.
Hmm.
And if when that comes, recruiting will follow. I wouldn't start to get worried about recruiting specifically for the 2025 class unless it's like late October, early November, and they're sitting with a losing record, or are sitting in a point where it's like, hey, this hasn't picked up the way we thought it would in terms of a scheduling standpoint, in terms of a wins and losses standpoint, this hasn't picked up the way they thought. Then I'd start to get concerned about recruiting. But at this point right now, even though targets are somewhat falling off the board, it is still only June. There's plenty of time for these recruitments to potentially swing back Nebraska's way.
Hmm.
Obviously, it is harder to flip a kid or flip a prospect than it is to land them straight out, at least land them straight up. But Nebraska has positioned themselves to be that school that can flip a lot of these guys with some on-field success. And a school that may potentially underperform Nebraska could be the beneficiary of just the fact that they have these relationships and these facilities and all these pros on their side. The last thing a lot of these guys are waiting for is just they want to see Nebraska show on-field success. If they do that, I think you're going to see recruiting take off in a way it hasn't in a long time around here. And again, I'm not just saying that from a trying to get everyone's hopes up, trying to do anything like that. It's the stuff that I've heard. This is genuine, like straight up just from what I've heard from recruits to you guys. And this is what I'm hearing. And just I would say stay encouraged. Don't necessarily get frustrated with how frustrating June can be for recruiting. It is frustrating for everybody. Everyone wins and loses this month. USC just lost 2 5-star defensive linemen,
Hmm.
and they just rebuilt their defensive staff. They thought that was the final solution, but here they are, having to kind of rebuild their defensive class a little bit, even with this new staff. This month isn't easy for anybody. This month is not for the weak. June is not recruiting in general, recruiting at the level Nebraska's trying to do right now, recruiting at this P4 level where you're trying to bring in these 4 or 5 stars. It's not for the weak. You gotta be tough, you gotta be strong, you gotta be willing to kind of see some of these recruitments through, take some tough losses sometimes, but you cannot get discouraged. And so this is just the reality of where Nebraska is right now, kind of an unfortunate reality, but just something I wanted to kind of touch on. I know I kind of rambled there for a sec, but something I wanted to touch on kind of before we get out of here. Steve, kind of anything on that, and any last thoughts from you?
No, I think that was well said, and I completely agree with you.
Sweet, appreciate you. Well, that'll do it for us. Coming out of this last official visit weekend for June. A busy, newsy week for Nebraska. Should continue to be some news this next 2-3 weeks. Just coming out of these official visits. Guys are closing in on decisions. We've got like 5-6 guys I know for sure are looking at making a commitment here in the next couple of weeks. So keep an eye on that. We'll have everything updated at Inside Nebraska, just on the latest of what's going on. And yeah, like and subscribe to this video. Stay tuned to Inside Nebraska, and that'll do it from me and Steve.